amongst ourselves. Actually, welcome Facebook fans and everyone this evening. I know if you are on Facebook, you can certainly view without commenting, but boy, we love to have the comments because that's where the excitement and the conversation really takes off. I also want to welcome those of you that are jumping on Zoom. I see a couple people. I would be remiss if I didn't give a heartfelt thanks to Jeff and Jane Greasy, who, like us, have been to every single sip. They don't have to, though. We have to. So they've actually made 27 sips in a row. My name is Martin Cody with Cellar Angels. Cellar Angels is a direct-to-consumer wine curator. We've been at this for 10 years, and our first guest this evening played a pivotal role in how we actually got formed, and I'll share that in a second. But for 10 years, we've been sourcing wines exclusively from Napa and Sonoma, bringing them direct to you into your households. And now, because of the pandemic, we did a little bit of pivot 27 weeks ago, more than half a year ago, to let you have date night in your living room with winemakers, wine professionals, custodians of the vineyards, if you will, exclusively from these vineyards and wineries in Napa and Sonoma. Sit in your living room, drink their wines, and learn about everything they do and how they do it. Tonight, I'm going to just raise a glass in advance to everyone that will be joining, and to Stephen Corley, and also to the recent passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which just hit the wires this evening. So our prayers and thoughts and condolences to all involved there. But I want to, on a celebratory note, talk a little bit about how we do this and why we do this. So there's over 1,500 wineries in Napa and Sonoma, and about 85% of them don't have national distribution. So the direct-to-consumer route is really the best way for them to thrive. And that's where we come in. So we want to have a platform to give them, so they don't have to jump on planes and fly all over the United States. Not that some of them don't like to do that, but now in a pandemic and now with a lot of turmoil in the wine country region, it's a lot easier for them to meet and greet you virtually. We've all developed way too many social media and web broadcasting skills than we ever wanted to possess. And it's something that we want to do every Friday night. So Hans Greasy, Jeff and Jane, Julie Fogarty, thank you so much for jumping on. Kay Jurica, good to see you. And without much further ado, I want to introduce to you a friend of the company, a friend of ours, who I met with at the Ambassador East Chicago in 2010 to talk about this concept. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say give it up for Stephen Corley, but no one can hear the crowd noise. So Stephen Corley, thank you so much for joining us on a Friday night.
Oh, well, what a delight to be here. It's hard to imagine what's happened in the last 10 years in the world, in the wine industry. But that was, as we talked about then, because we have such long relationships that we've been blessed with in my family, I remember saying something along the lines of, we don't know exactly where this is going, but it's going somewhere and we can do it together.
It was funny because I did look up, how we first got in contact. And I don't know if you had filled out a form or if someone said, hey, you two need to meet, but it was in 2010. And I find it fascinating that you were in town in Chicago, probably working, the market. And we did have lunch at the Ambassador East in Chicago, which is now unfortunately a defunct hotel, which has a great history and folklore. And I mean, I remember when I was in high school, prom, you went to the Ambassador East for prom, you went to the pump room and those sorts of places downtown because that was what you did. And for the music buffs among us, if you are a Phil Collins Genesis fan and you remember the album, and I use the term album, I didn't use the term download. If you remember the album, No Jacket Required, that was actually a reference to the Ambassador East Hotel in Chicago because he was not allowed into the hotel because he had no jacket on. Stephen and I had lunch there. I told him a little bit about Cellar Angels. And when you get to know the Corley family, you get to understand how steeped in tradition they are, how committed to the process of fine winemaking they stay committed to. And really, and I think, and Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, what I noticed is, and it stemmed from their father, how personally involved they are in the customer service side of the business.
Well, for sure. And shout out to Chicago, since my father was born in Evanston Hospital and grew up there in Evanston and Winnetka. So near and dear to our heart. I'm sure we talked about that when we met. It is always a joy to basically kind of in a way do what we're doing right now, which is have a conversation with food and wine and tell stories and reminisce and look forward to a brighter future. And that was very much my dad, and is very much my 6 siblings and I, and how we approach things and work in the community.
Well, now that's interesting. The 6 siblings I didn't know was the number. I know several of the brothers, Kevin and Chris, and we'll get to those folks in a second. But I also want everyone to know that this is really a celebratory evening, because the Corleys, and I'll wish them this right now, the Corleys are celebrating 50 years as a winery in Napa Valley, 50, as a family-run winery in Napa Valley. So happy birthday.
Well,
I'm looking forward to the next 50.
Yeah. Second half of the first century, I call it. It's been extraordinary. Really hard to believe in 1970. The best word we have for it is peculiar thing that our dad did. Southern California businessman, loved wine. He had graduated from Stanford. So Northern California was a bit of home for him. Falling in love with wine and food societies. There weren't really wine dinners back then. You joined an organization, you paid your monthly dues, gosh knows what they were, $10 a month. And then the club would buy wine and house it and cellar it, and then say in 5 or 7 years later, when appropriate, they would do a themed dinner with, say, the 62 Bordeaux's, or and say 69 or something like that. So your dues went to buy wine and put on a dinner. And that's where my dad really learned to drink wine at the table, friends, fellowship, food and wine.
Well, and I like the friends, fellowship, and food and wine, because we say it all the time at Cellar Angels. Wine brings people together. And we've said it for 27 weeks in a row. Just because we have to physically distance doesn't mean we have to socially distance. And this is a very communal beverage. And so when you have good food, good wine, and great conversation, it's a pretty nice evening or afternoon. So I don't want to just, limit it to the 5 o'clock hour. But I'm fascinated by your dad's just 2 decisions, really, is what prompted him to leave the Midwest and go to Stanford. And then when he graduated Stanford and went into business, what was the business? And then how long after the business did he actually decide, let's look at this wine country thing?
Like most things in life, it's a bit of a journey. He came west kind of for opportunity, although opportunity existed for a guy like him in many, many places, but it was going to be different, maybe a little more innovative on the West Coast. This is the 50s. And then ended up in Southern California, kind of the hustle and bustle and exciting time, learning about wine and food society in Los Angeles, coming back up to his Stanford roots, or college roots, so to speak.
Right.
Just kind of exciting, a story for my dad. His dad made a point of taking him away from the hustle and bustle of 30s and 40s Chicago to go see grandfather down in Southern Illinois, who was a country doctor and farmer. Actually sold half the family farm to pay for medical school or pay for his practice, however it worked back then. And so then dad's got the 5 oldest kids running around Los Angeles in the booming 60s. He was in the insurance business. He had an insurance company, and coming up to Napa, Northern California, and then thinking, well, how about I have a vineyard? How about I grow grapes? How about I make an investment? It would have been for him at the time, and have a place that's different than the hustle and bustle of 60s Los Angeles. And we would come up and stay at the cottage and swim in the reservoir and pick rocks out of the vineyard. And then that was 1970 to 78. And then he moved up to Northern California or to Napa, St. Helena in particular, and kind of went pro, I call it. So went from gentleman farmer to vintner. And our first harvest and crush was 1980.
Okay, well, it's interesting because, and hello, Barb Randall, outstanding. Thank you for joining from Florida. Cornelia Wimberly, hello and good evening. And Jason Werner, hello and good evening. Thanks so much for joining. with Stephen Corley, celebrating 50 years, and we're learning a little bit about how Dad, Jay Corley, who I had the absolute privilege and honor of meeting and sitting with in this little spot behind me, chit-chatting in the vineyards and talking, literally talking about wine, customer service. And we were there working, and he was making certain that I was having a good time. And from a hospitality standpoint, which I thought was amazing. And coming up to Napa in 1970, it had to be like a ghost town.
It was pretty quiet, and I didn't quite get to your earlier question about customer service, but yes, this was, it's hard to imagine now that we're so inundated with Napa and success and Napa Cabernet. This is 6 years before the Paris tasting. This was a quiet town. When I say town, a valley. Yeah, it was rural. It was, and it still is very rural.
Sure.
But he wanted to be in he wanted to grow Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in particular. He wanted to be in a cool part of wherever. Carneros didn't really exist as a distinction from Napa Valley. Certainly the Oak Knoll District as a sub-appellation didn't, but they're both characterized by a cool climate, which we'll probably get to when we talk about the wine for the Chardonnay. So yes, it was not a foregone conclusion back today. It's like, oh, buy land in Napa, be successful, grow Cabernet. It's like, oh my God, no.
Well, and it's interesting too that he wanted to grow Chardonnay and Pinot. So that was pretty insightful. Hello to Michelle Kuznets. Hello to John Jacobs. Hello to Jim Brubaker from Colorado. Thank you. And Tom Randall. I would be remiss if I didn't say hello to you. Tom and Barb, husband and wife, they joined separately. So I don't know if they're in different rooms. And if we harken back to the 70s, I don't know if it's a Rob and Laura Petrie thing, but they're both on separately. So since we're talking about 70s, and actually I want to bring up our first poll question, Stephen. I'll interrupt for just a second because it has to do with the 70s. And so all of you getting your polled fingers nimble and ready to go. We're going to talk a little bit about what was going on in 1970 when Jay Corley decided to purchase some land. So in 1970, Jay Corley purchased land in Napa Valley to build an estate vineyard. Which of the following statements is not true about the year 1970? Cost of a new home was $26,000, $26,000 and change. Fergie Jenkins was opening day pitcher for the Chicago Cubs. Cost of a gallon of gas was 40 cents. So I'm going to give some people, I've got a couple answers coming in right now. Interestingly enough, I will give them about 10 more seconds. So if you have not chosen an answer, get your keyboard moving. I don't know if Stephen even knows the answer to this. Might have some ideas. We'll give it 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the number one answer chosen was that Fergie Jenkins was opening day pitcher for the Chicago Cubs. That is in fact a true statement in 1970. Hall of Famer Fergie was the opening day pitcher in 1970. The next two were tied. Cost of a new home in 1970 was $26,600. True statement. A gallon of gas actually wasn't 40 cents. It was 36 cents. 36 cents for a gallon of gas. So when we think about, and I don't want to age Stephen in the Corley family, but when we think about how long ago gas was 36 cents, 1970 seems ancient. And it's amazing that Jay had the insight to say, you know what, I think I'm going to go buy some land up in Napa. And he wanted to have an estate vineyard. Why was the estate aspect so important to him?
It was with an eye to the future. I think I might have coined the expression for him, but sunshine to wine, where he had wines in mind before he bought any land, and then it was planted. The clones were picked. Back then it was different than the replantings we've done because there were not as many choices, but the spacing, the posts, everything was kind of intentional towards a destination. He was a pretty intentional guy. Pretty fun guy, great wit. Well, you know, because you've met him and spent time with him. Affable, gracious, but he was purposeful.
Yes, he certainly had intent. And for those of you now joining, thank you so much. I want to tell everyone how we're drinking Stephen's Chardonnay, and I'll share my screen to share with you a little bit about how you can get this. So you have to then go to the Cellar Angels website, and we have put together what we refer to as sip kits. So you go to shop, you go to wine all, the page will load, and then you will see that, oh, I didn't go to sip kit. Sorry, I'll do sip kits and verticals. You will see the ability to grab either a custom collection of some verticals or our sip virtual wine tasting kit. So this kit changes every single week. One bottle comes out, another bottle goes in, and you have 6 bottles that you can order, one kit. And so for the next 6 Friday nights, you can join us here, commiserate with the winemaker, ask questions in the chat. If you haven't already on Zoom, ask some questions. You can ask questions of other attendees. You can ask questions of myself and Stephen, but this is how it's all done. This is why we're drinking this lovely, lovely Chardonnay. And we're going to talk about this Chardonnay right now. And I'm going to try to hold up my bottle, which is out of focus.
That's pretty good.
Stephen's bottle. Stephen's got a better camera than me because look at that label. So this is the Corley Block 1 Clone 96 estate grown Chardonnay, and the word estate is important, and that's what your father wanted. Oak Knoll District. So we kind of get, if the funnel all the way down to this. Walk us through this wine and the designation and some of the attributes that are special with regard to this wine.
Sure. This is a way that we can look at Napa Valley, and then the southern end, the coolest area of Napa Valley, Carneros, Coombsville, those are the coolest areas. Oak Knoll is interesting because it also has the longest growing season. So it is good for both Chardonnay and Pinot Noirs, but has enough time to ripen the big reds, as we call them, as well. It's effectively slow cooking the Cabernet, if to go to the other end, because it has the total days to get things right, but no day is all that hot. I mean, overall over the decades. Then you get to the vineyard designation, then the block. In this case, block 1 is on the west side of the property on Big Ranch Road. Blocks 1 and 2 that are on the road, they have a gravelly loam soil. Blocks 3 and 4 in the middle of the property are a loamy clay, and blocks 5, 6, and 7 that are adjacent to the river, they have a sandy loam because of what's happened with the river meandering and flooding. So block 1, particular type of soil on the property. It's an 80-acre property overall. About 56 is plantable. And then clone 96, Martin, we laughed earlier, what happened to the first 95 clones, like W40, but it doesn't work that way. We've history of science behind it, and it's just a name, it's just a typing. There are some old clones that have some good names, but really think of say Granny Smith and Golden Delicious Apple.
Well, it's interesting because we've had several discussions in the last 27 weeks with Pinot Noir producers, and certainly clonal selection in Pinot is of paramount importance. And I really, it's funny because I don't know, I mean, I've seen the Wente Chardonnay of clone, I've seen a bunch of other ones, but I've not heard of clone 96. So tell me a little bit about the tasting characteristics of attributes with regards to clone 96. And Jeff Greasy, I know you're listening. So when Stephen is talking about where the blocks are in the vineyard, it seems like a good segue to do something. So, but I'll let you answer that in chat. But go ahead, Stephen. Tell me about clone 96.
Clone 96. It has some traditional Chardonnay characteristics, but it tends towards some tropical fruits. Maybe not so much star fruit, but fig, melon. And some citrus overtones are in the flavors of the wine for me. Back in the day, meaning pre-COVID, would describe the wine at 30,000 feet. I call it my seatmate. Looking at me, reading magazines and what I do, and in the wine business or the food business.
Right.
So, a tropical fruit cheesecake is kind of how I describe this wine. It's got some bright flavors to it. It's got a nice beam of acidity, but it has some weight and texture. So it has some roundness. That's the cheesecake part of it. The fruit is on top, but underlying it, and it's different than, say, buttery. It's more of a texture. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I love what you said with regards to a beam of acidity, because you do have the front palate, you have the mid palate, but throughout you've got this balance and that cheesecake. I do kind of like that idea. By the way, Jim Brubaker in Denver is drinking a Corley Family Syrah, the 2013 estate grown Syrah. So right. I'm a big fan of that as well. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, which I was teasing Jeff Greasy, because the favorite part of the show is when we do Google Earth, and Jeff is a big Google Earth fan. So when you were describing exactly where these blocks are, I think it's important that I show people that, but I also think it's important that I prepare in advance and open Google Earth before this. So keep talking amongst yourselves and I will find, the acidity aspect is really something that I love about this wine, because it's not, like you mentioned it, it's not that buttery aspect.
Right. It's and we actually ferment, we do a 2-part fermentation to capture the acidity and the tropical fruit flavors. And then we ferment some of the grapes a different way to take on the weight, Lee stirring in the barrel fermentation. And then when we think of the beam, it's both kind of a laser beam. It's present, you know, kind of focused, but it also is kind of a structural beam that holds together the tropical fruit and the cheesecake. So like bringing them both together in the 1970s or 80s, you would have had kind of one clone planted across everywhere. You probably would have used one yeast strain, and you would have done your fermentation one particular way to capture the best. But now, even though we have the same clone, we will use 2 different yeast strains for the 2 different methods to try and capture the acid and capture the texture, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And that is probably not an overnight maturation process with regards to understanding that, which is why after 50 years, as Jeff Greasy has pointed out, and John Jacobs is remiss because he's not tasting, this is what Chardonnay should taste like. Par excellence. So let me show everyone where in the heck we're talking about with Stephen. So there's that wonderful blue orb. I currently am right down here, and there's like 4 hurricanes out here, but we won't get into that right now. So let's talk about Corley Family. And the neat thing about this vineyard and this winery is that, wow, that was fast, is that you are on the valley floor. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of neat that you can see, you know, where we are with the mountains all around. You have, and I'll actually zoom in a little bit so you can see this is, we'll get into the replica of Monticello behind me, which is absolutely stunning. But if we back out a little bit, here's Big Ranch Road that you talked about. Here's a lot of the blocks that you have. And what I find fascinating is, you know, Route 29 is right here. Here's the Oak Knoll region, and here's Napa. I mean, you're right here. It's insane how close you are to Napa. And most people that have been to wine country have driven by your property on Silverado Trail or 29 1,000 times and didn't know that this little bit of paradise was right here.
Right in between. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So you see the river there, the verdant green.
Yes.
On the right and Big Ranch on the left. And this is, Google Earth is, I didn't realize, kind of out of date, frankly. Well, it's not that out of date, but you can see this is taken when we're doing some replanting. So
yeah, I'll get my people to call them, because I don't know if they're going to make it Google, but we'll see if they can update Google Earth.
Well, they'll probably scrape up some cash and figure it out.
Yes, exactly.
So block 1 is going to be, so the road divides, the driveway, divides between the southern blocks and the northern blocks. So that's the road. Okay. And then you go towards Big Ranch. On the south side of the driveway is block 1. Exactly. And the north side is block 2. And then that avenue that we call it the north-south running, that actually is where the slope from Big Ranch Road flattens out all the way through to in front of the Jefferson House. And that whole flat bit is where is the loamy clay. And then the next avenue is put in the best place we could have done it in terms of separating out the sandy soils that have come over centuries, millennia probably, with a meandering, flooding river.
Well, and that's what I love about properties that are close to the river, is that you do have that thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of the river, you know, breaching its banks, depositing all sorts of different sediments and different soil types and shells and everything like that into the soil, then reseeding and then changing course and then moving over. I mean, so it's interesting that every winery that I know that's near the river has incredibly diverse soils.
Yes, it's a phenomenally diverse geographic place. For those that know the science, I don't want to get buried in geology because I'm not a geologist, but in Napa Valley, there's 33, help me out, especially if there's a geologist in Colorado, with 33 of 36 soil series that exist on the surface of the earth. Napa has 33 of the 36. And there's a very unusual formation in one of the hillsides that at some point, millions of years ago, flipped 50% and brought very buried rock towards the surface to then erode down. That's how the diversity happens. They don't know how the Franciscan Formation, they don't know exactly how that happened. They just know that it did.
Right.
And so all the alluvial fans, that's often what you hear us talking about if that's the thing. But the flooding river is kind of the alluvial fan in reverse, metaphorically.
Exactly.
It's not eroding down, it's eroding out of.
So no, it's a great point. It's actually carrying things away and eroding and undercutting some things. I mean, and I agree with your assessment of the Chardonnay. First of all, I love the color. You probably can't see it against me rocking the lavender this evening. But I can see it on your blue, but it's got that great gold. It's not that thick, unctuous gold that I don't know, maybe some of those gold Chardonnays go through way too much mallow, but this has that racy acidity to it, has that Burgundian body to it, and is still very aromatic. So hats off to Chris for the crafting of this wine. And let's talk about the family now. So it is a family affair. I did not know, again, that you had 6 siblings or 5 siblings and yourself. I know Kevin is GM or president. Chris is the winemaker. You handle everything as it relates to getting the product into markets. But your father was very intent and not. I mean, like you said, he had a purpose. He didn't force any of the children into the business. How did you all come about and leave very successful careers and then gravitate back to the winery?
It was a fairly organic, natural process. Chris is number 6 in the lineup of 7, and it is 6 boys and 1 girl. My sister is the youngest of all funny family stories that we could talk about. Growing up in St. Helena and first dates, and we were all actually gone by the time it happened, but when she was like 4, we would talk about, okay, Kevin, you go to the pizza parlor, you go to the hamburger joint, you go to the back row of the movie theater, you go to the gravel pit. We got it all covered.
We've got it all covered, exactly.
Shout out to Carolyn. So yes, Kevin left his banking career. He came in at a time to be general manager on a project that we had. And then we were replanting our vineyards because of phylloxera in the 90s. And he took that on with our wine grower at the time. And that's how we evolved into being both the GM, eventually the president as he is now, and the chairman, but as the wine grower. And he's not a grape grower.
Right.
He's a wine grower. I think we've talked about that before. So he's trying to grow grapes to make into the wines that we want to have, and working with Chris, winemaker, who did grow up, spend most of his time at the winery. And this is probably where I should say, there's not a vine in the ground that Kevin didn't plant and is replanting for his 2nd time, or that Chris wasn't the crush master, cellar master, assistant winemaker, or winemaker for since we started replanting in 1991.
Well, let's pause for a second there, because that's an impressive statement. And I think this harkens back to why we like limited production wineries. You know where the fruit is coming from. It's all estate grown. It's all, you own all your own vineyards. So when you say there's not a single vine in the ground that Kevin didn't plant or is now in the process of replanting, and that Chris wasn't involved in some capacity from assistant winemaker to winemaker to cellar master in the entire estate.
Yes, and so it's state grown. When I came back in '97, and maybe Chris and I were a little newer to the business than Kevin, which was 1986. But
Oh, wow.
back then it was kind of a legal, I thought of it personally as kind of a legal thing, 3 years control. Yeah, that's great, and talk about that. But really over time, I've appreciated that it's about experience.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin and Chris know how to farm and make grapes from our grapes at our vineyards. We've had the hot years, we've had the cool years, we've had the wet years. So it's not just, oh, I've been making X, and no disparagement to any other winemaker anywhere in the world that has a wide range of experience. But in terms of Block 1, Clone 96, I mean, we've been doing it a long time. So maximizing it, its flavor profile, and knowing, this year we got to dial it back a little bit because we've been here before. I mean, these grapes here before.
And that can obviously only come with experience. And it's each new vintage is a new vintage, but yet you have 40 plus 49 vintages to draw from. And I'm sure there's notebooks, or now it's saved in some sort of computer software program or whatever that says, okay, I remember 86 was a relatively wet spring, and we had a long, dry, hot summer, and then we had a late, there's so much information you can draw from. And Chris, this isn't the only winery that he makes wine for. So he's got experience up and down the valley and that capacity to also draw from, and then impart that wisdom and knowledge into the fruit and into the vines that you guys are growing. So it really is, that's a fantastic arsenal of skills with regards to a tapestry of fantastic wine.
All right, you can join the marketing department. Since it's me.
I'm available. I'm available. It's by the way, a couple of folks I want to say hello to. Brett Saunders, hello, and Diane Yetter from the South Loop of Chicago, which back in the day when your grandfather was running around town, that was bad Leroy Brown jurisdiction, in the south side of Chicago. Now it's a fantastic place to live. So Diane, thanks for joining us. The thing I think about your portfolio, which amazes me, is its breadth. You have a number of Chardonnays, you've got tremendous Syrahs, you've got tremendous Cabernets, obviously. You still have Pinots, you have sparkling wine. Give us the philosophy of you from the sales side, working with Kevin and Chris, saying, okay, what are we after? How do we determine where we're going to go? Because as you know better than anybody, making wine is easy. Selling wine is not so easy.
Yeah, making wine is easy in the sense that, yes, add yeast, have sugar, make wine.
Exactly.
Right, it happens thousands of years ago in Georgia, meaning in Russia, and in the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. Kind of controlled chaos is one of the ways that I look at it, because you're trying to nursemaid a process that's gonna happen. But yes, on the selling and marketing side, and what we're, I think, good at is being ourselves, and knowing kind of what we have and trying to maximize that. As I mentioned about it didn't happen over time that we would be able to make a wine like this, and to split the fermentations and know what oak and a concrete egg to capture these different aspects of the winemaking, and then put them together with different yeast. We just have a lot of experience and a lot of practice. So it's the different tiers and the different series are really designed to showcase what the wines have to offer. So we very specifically are trying to make a Clone 96 Chardonnay from Block 1 with this wine, or Block 2 Clone 777 Pinot Noir. We have a Block 3 Clone 95 Chardonnay, where we're capturing that. But if we make a Corley Reserve Chardonnay, for example, we're trying to bring those captured elements together in a different expression.
Okay, how so? Let's dial into the portfolio, because reserve, as we know, has no legal definition. So what does reserve from a Corley perspective mean, and how do you go about saying, okay, this is going to be our reserve wine?
Exceedingly exceptional and age-worthy.
Okay, and is that done at the tasting table, or at the, when does that happen in the process?
At the blending table, yes. Okay. And we, from the get-go in 1980 and 81, we just made our wines, one of them. And in 82 was the first time we designated Corley Reserve wines. And my dad, being a good Midwesterner, wanted to be able to answer the question honestly. How, Jay, you've never made wine before. My dad wasn't the winemaker, he was the vintner. But how would you know what's reserve and what's not? And he wanted to be able to answer the question honestly. It's like, well, I didn't know for a few years. And he also didn't want to have like the marketing department say, but we've always made one. It's like, right. No, we didn't. And so we had Cabernet and Chardonnay in 80 and 81. Then we had 2 tiers in 82. In 1988, the year wasn't there to make a reserve Cabernet, and we didn't. We've made it most all the times, and reserve Chardonnay most all the years, but there's years when we've stepped away. And we hope that our longtime legacy customers and new people would appreciate that we don't want to charge you for something that's not on the bottle.
No, I mean, so is it a matter, like, I'm interested who's sitting at that blending table. Is it you, Chris, and Kevin?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so you're sitting around with a bunch of beakers, a lot of red Solo cups, and you're, I mean, I've been to these things, and so is it a unanimous thing where all of a sudden you guys are tasting the Chardonnay and you're like, OMFG, or, holy cow, Kevin, are you getting this? Chris, are you getting this? And everyone just kind of, I mean, how does it happen? We're like, yep, reserve Chardonnay, got it.
It's pretty, one of the ways that I described our management style over the decades has been everybody has a say, but only one person has a vote. So in winemaking, it's Chris. In wine growing, right. It's Kevin. In sales and marketing, it's me. So we're all about feedback and input. But at the end of the day, somebody has to make the call. And so for winemaking, it's Chris. And it's a process. My favorite tastings are in January when we review, say, the first working week Tuesday of January, we will review Chardonnay from the previous harvest. All the different lots that we have, all the different clones, all the different pickings, all the different fermentations, press cuts, whatever. On the next Thursday, we'll do Pinot Noir. Then we'll do Merlot. Then we'll do Cab Franc and Syrah, and then we will do Cabernet. Mm-hmm. And that's our process. One of my favorite, most memorable tastings was a Merlot. This has got to be 15 years ago. And we finished the tasting, different experiments we did in the vineyard with shoot thinning, I think, for the Merlot. And Kevin was on the phone with Angel, one of our several 30-plus year employees, our vineyard manager, and he was telling him how they were going to prune a Block 4 Merlot the next day. And you kind of, for a commerce business guy, accounting and marketing degree, that sort of feedback loop, you're at the table with the grower, the maker, sales and marketing, and then you take action. That's going to happen. This is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 6:30 the next morning, something's going to happen differently.
You're picking Merlot. Yeah. Does Chris use any oak on this Chard?
Yes. Yeah. A term I like to use is judicious. So there is oak on the Chardonnay. Hopefully it's present. Back in the day when chicken tarragon became a popular dish, Kevin would kind of laugh about how when you order chicken tarragon, you don't expect to get chicken and tarragon. You expect to get chicken seasoned with tarragon. That's kind of how we look at oak. You ordering a Chardonnay, we want you to get Chardonnay seasoned with oak, not Chardonnay and oak. Mm-hmm. And I kind of had a little fist in there because sometimes that's the way it can come across. And if that's the intent, That's great. That's just not how we roll with it.
No, I agree. It's, and you've been around 50 years. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know. The preponderance of oak obviously has ebbed and flow, and the pendulum swings a whole bunch of different ways. But I love what you harkened back to earlier with regards to the balance of the yeast strains, and one striking nuance or depth and weight, and the other one striking acidity, and knowing that after 50 years to say, okay, block one's going to be doing this. I think it's fascinating, and it's got to be a hell of a lot of fun at the blending table.
It is a lot of fun, and I've said it a while. We've been practicing,
Yep.
but it is like so many things in life. It is a practice.
There's law practice, there's medical practice, there's wine practice.
And there's meditation, and there's it's you sometimes you get it right, and sometimes you get it wrong, but you just keep on going and learning and practicing and taking notes, like you said, and filing things away and being okay. I'm going to be prepared because that yeast strain on that clone from that hot year, it went somewhere I didn't expect, so I file it away.
Not necessary, Jeff, that comment in the sidebar. Not necessary, Jeff, at all. Can we demote Jeff to silent? Jeff said there's also Martin's golf practice, which is also not good. There's a food question. Diane Yetter has a question on food pairings with this Chardonnay. What are your suggestions? You mentioned chicken tarragon, but that was more of an oak analogy. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what your experience, Chris's experience, you guys sitting around the table. What's the home run with this?
I think that the home and putting how we put the wine together with kind of the yin and the yang of acidity and texture, and that roundness feel of the creamy texture, but not the butter, is I like to think of flavor intensity in wine pairings, and I like to think of the yin and the yang. So work with me for a moment. Like an ensalada caprese, right? There are some tomato salads, when you're reminded that all tomato is a fruit. There's some sweetness in there, and it's beautiful and a little balsamic, and it's great. Just all tomatoes. Basil, salt, pepper, oil, and vinegar. And there's times when cheese is all good. We'll say mozzarella. It's like, well, it's good. But when you put the tomato with the cheese in an ensalada caprese, I'm thinking of the big slices, you actually don't let the acid of the tomato build up, and you don't let the fat of the cheese cream up, if that makes sense. You get to have and then rinse. If I were to put it in order, it would be the pH of the cheese and then the rinsing of the acidity. That's why an ensalada caprese works. So a wine like this, you could have with a rich, I think, dish with some cream and some butter in it, because the acid comes in there to let it kind of rinse off the palate. One of my stories is kind of a mid-rate fettuccine Alfredo, where if you're coming back from a trip and you're visiting with friends and you're showing photographs from the old days, like real photographs. I'm only 52, actually. But the speaker is not eating, and the oil's rising on the fettuccine Alfredo, and the vinyl seats, and you're just kind of sliding down in the thing because you're just getting weighed down on the whole thing. There's so much oil and butter and richness, but a wine like this, like with lobster, I mean, it's probably a pretty privileged group on air here. I mean, that kind of thing would be great. Maybe a ceviche, maybe that's already bright enough in flavor, and you'd get too much brightness by having that bright ceviche with the bright Chardonnay, if that kind of bookends where to go with it.
It does, and I like it. And I also, I mean, you're right about the ceviche, you're right about the lobster, or any kind of claw, stone crabs, lobster, any of those things with hot drawn butter would be fantastic. I want to kind of draw and bring people back to the importance of when you began and what was happening, not necessarily in 1970. In 1976, we had the Montreal Olympics. In 1980, we had the Miracle on Ice. But there was a bunch of things happening in the wine world that you kind of predated, but really shone a light on Napa, and it's cause for my second poll question, or our second poll question this evening. So I need everyone to put down their lobster and actually dry off your fingers, get a napkin, take another sip of Chardonnay. We're going to poll question number 2. And I actually, now John, I'm with you. I'm getting hungry. I'm talking about lobster as well. So which of these played a major role in shining a spotlight on Napa Valley as a wine region? The 60 Minutes episode on the French paradox, the 1972 US Open held at Pebble Beach where every golfer vacationed afterwards in wine country, the 1977 Kentucky Derby winner, California Colt Seattle Slew, sparking huge wine parties around the region. Wow, a lot of votes in early. So we've got, I'll give you 10 more seconds. Stephen, you may not know the answer to this, but I would lose that bet. 5, 4, 3, I need one more person, grab a vote. 2, 1, 0. Interesting. So I don't think the 72 Open was at Pebble Beach. I made that up. I apologize. And I'm confident Seattle Slew, even though Seattle Slew was the Derby winner in 77, that colt was not from California. So 60 Minutes and the French paradox. There might be some younger folks on the broadcast this evening that aren't even aware of 2 pretty fundamental things which helped shape Napa as a region, and one of them being the French paradox. That was earth-shattering. I mean, that was big. I remember when 60 Minutes had that. Talk us through what that summarize what the French paradox was, and then summarize the phylloxera.
Sure. To put in, maybe it was the sideways for wine of the 80s. 60 Minutes. We didn't have all the media that we have now, of course. Very important show, very well researched, and this was that a French culture that has a very high saturated fat diet with all the sauces. I mean, overall, broad brush, but it was also the 80s.
And all the dairy and all the cheeses.
All the dairy and the cheese, all the cholesterol. They had very healthy hearts and very healthy arteries. And it was described as the French paradox because you have this diet, but you have all this wine drinking going on, and they have a healthy lifestyle. And it got people thinking about wine as Americans, as healthy and
medicinal.
As medicinal. They were highly regulated in terms of what we can say, things about health benefits for a good reason. There's a lot of silly laws on the books as well.
I'm not regulated though.
So that was a sea change in the way that people would look at drinking wine. It's like, it's good for you. Not that alcohol was bad, but actually this is a positive thing to add to your routine, having wine daily. Mm-hmm.
Yep. It was, I think sea change is an absolute perfect description. It literally stopped people in their tracks and made it okay to drink red wine because of the French paradox. And then I think there was a bunch of follow-on movement, why don't French women get fat? There's a lot of books and stuff like that, considering the diet that they had was so, and the antithesis of what a US Surgeon General would conclude would be a healthy diet, but yet they had a very, very low preponderance of cardiac disease. So it was fascinating. And they linked it, thank you 60 Minutes, to red wine. Not a bad marketing ploy if someone from the American wine industry helped foster that, but I don't think they did.
I don't think they did, but I'm all for the Wine Institute taking credit, or the Napa Valley Vineyard. I've been on both boards, but no, it really was uncharted territory, and you don't know how the response is going to be. So yeah, we were so fortunate to be in Napa pre Paris tasting, growing grapes, to be making wine pre French paradox, to be making Pinot Noir. My dad was really a Burgundian at heart, where we were earlier in the conversation, He liked the subtlety and delicate nature of Pinot Noir, in particular, and before Sideways.
Right.
And it,
Did that love of Pinot, and I'm looking, and I struggle for ways to articulate this because it's such a deeply held passion and soulful adoration for Pinot Noir for people that have it. And he had it early on before, Pinot Noir in the United States was Pinot Noir. Was he able to inculcate Chris with that? And does Chris share that passion for Pinot Noir, or is Chris more having come up in Napa Valley and born and raised there type of thing? Is he Cabernet focused?
Oh no, I think that the indoctrination happened to be like estate grown focused.
Okay.
To take what you have and make it the best that you can make it. If that makes sense. So most definitely we all have a very fond heart for Pinot Noir and for the Chicago Cubs, which actually won the World Series the same year that my dad passed away. So that was.
Oh, please tell me he got to see some of it, at least the run up.
He got to see some of it.
Good.
But
he got to see more than Ron Santo, but he got to see at least that they were going places. And
yes.
I almost got divorced in 2003. She's off camera because we were spending the King's ransom on playoff tickets that we couldn't afford. And she looked at us and said, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "You don't understand. The Cubs don't get to the playoffs." So we're going to go see one of these games.
Yeah.
So,
shout out to Bud Light playoffs. Who's talking about the playoffs?
What are those at 1060 West Addison?
So Pinot Noir, to me, it's the most sensuous variety when it's well done. The mouthfeel on it is extraordinary. Lots of favorable expressions around our place about Pinot Noir. Cabernet is the king of wines. Pinot Noir is the wine of kings.
Ooh,
That's old.
I like that.
We didn't make that up, but you sometimes you start with Pinot Noir early on in your red wine drinking career because it's more approachable, less tannic. It's an easier entry into that red wine world. But I find that people come back around to it later on once they realize the delicacy that's there in that variety. That there's a whole range. To me, it's symphonic. So I'll
perfect analogy.
I think Martin, you and I have talked about it before because I talk about it. But you've got like a wine that comes out of the gate and it's just bottled or just released, and it's kind of like a rock song. So for a guy that grew up in LA and I went to SMU. We have a lot of USC in our family. Thank you. Sorry, whatever. But Fleetwood Mac with the song Tusk.
Oh yeah.
So it's amplified music. You got the 5 or 6 instruments on the stage and they're just rocking it and it's out there. Then say a wine, we'll say that's Cabernet or Pinot Noir, doesn't matter. But then you've got we'll say that's Cabernet. And then you've got it maybe 5 years later and it's really broadening out and opening it up. And that's Fleetwood Mac playing Tusk with the USC marching band.
Right.
It is broad, it is expansive, it is percussive, it is brass, it is big, but it is in the Coliseum, it is resonating with you. You can feel that wine. Well, then you drink that Cabernet another 7-10 years later, and you got the percussions brought down a little bit, and you get more strings, and you get a lot of different strings, and you start really listening to how broad that song was. That was a rock song. Right. When you listen to, say, the LA Philharmonic play it, which they did too. And then eventually it becomes Muzak, 30, 40 years later. But you still get the notes of it. So I think what happens is that as people get experience with the palate and the flavors and are trying to pay attention, you can just enjoy it. It doesn't have to be a science or a lifelong commitment to this thing called wine. But with Pinot Noir, you get to the delicate, to the strings a little more quickly because it's just not so big to start with. But once you're experienced with it, then you can pick up all the subtle notes from the get-go. And I think that's when it becomes the wine of kings, when you makes it easier to get there. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting and fascinating because I mean, I've said it before on the broadcast and the program. I heard a great phrase, and you just mentioned one about the King of Wines and the Wine of Kings with regards to Pinot Noir, where you taste great Cabernet with your heart, you taste great Pinot Noir with your soul. And again, we didn't coin that phrase, but it does make one kind of, it resonates and go, okay, that's ethereal, that's deep, I can understand and appreciate that. But I think your symphonic explanation is equally apropos because that's something that everyone can relate to. You can pull out of a 100-piece orchestra when they're all playing together or when there's a solo. And Pinot Noir does that. It has the ability to do the 100-piece Philharmonic or the cello or this. And so it's fascinating. It's not an, as you know, easy varietal to produce. And it's often fraught with more heartache than success. But when it does succeed, it does in fact sing, and there's something special about it. And so I'm glad you guys are making it. I'm glad your father had a fondness for it. And certainly I'm glad that he put that fondness in all of you. That's outstanding.
Pretty special.
Tell me about the building behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay's, your father's adoration for the Jefferson mystique as it relates to wine, and I know it's a special place. It's generally not open to the public. You might be able to know Steve and get in there, but walk us through kind of that historical perspective as it relates to why and how and why you decided to put a replica here. I think it's awesome. It's so cool. But I think people need to learn that 7 minutes outside of Napa, you can be sitting in this beautiful oasis of Monticello, and it's just right there at your beckoning.
It's certainly multifaceted. So the house was built in '84, purpose-built as our offices and hospitality. As far as we know, it was the first purpose-built kitchen and dining room in a winery facility, because wine and food was all my dad, not all my dad knew, but what my dad leaned into in terms of how we were going to do things. When you came to visit us as, say, a trade person, you came into our home. Nobody actually lived there, but it's a house. My family dates back 380 years to Bedford County, Virginia. Mostly professionals, doctors, lawyers, pastors, and professionals. And so Virginia's on my dad's mind. Gracious hospitality, kind of the southern, becoming the Midwestern. And then this homage to Thomas Jefferson, maybe the nation's first epicure, probably the most well-known at the time.
Sure.
A man that was a paradox himself, for sure. But his love for wine and food and civil conversation at the table was, there was a graciousness, there was a dignity at the table that my dad loved and that we love. Mary Randolph, I think it was, his granddaughter, when she went off to Norfolk, Virginia, I think it was, she wrote about the feasts of reason that she missed. So this stimulating conversation that was had around her grandfather's table. I think I have the relationship right. So fast forward to Dad coming up to Napa Valley, buying an old prune orchard that was dilapidated and abandoned, planting mostly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir in 1970, wanting to name the ranch up front. The Monticello Vineyards sign went up. Italian winemaking heritage in California, our Virginia roots way back when, and the gracious hospitality that was the hallmark. So that came together in the homage of a building to Thomas Jefferson. It means low mountain. There's actually Mont Alto in Virginia, which is the high mountain, which the Jefferson Foundation now owns. And so this is our little homage to gracious hospitality, really, and aspirational ideas, high ideals, and excellence. And that also is a practice.
Yes. Well, I like the high ideals and aspirational aspects of it. I also love the phraseology of at the table, kind of getting back to what we talked about earlier, where you have good wine, good people, good food, and you are at the table. Great conversation usually ensues, hilarity, laughter, ideas exchanging, I mean, all of it's good. And all of it's usually brought about because of a great bottle of wine. And you certainly are producing quite a few of those. I want to introduce our last poll question. For those that are 0 for 2, you have a chance of redemption. We are ready. The best part of this single vineyard, 100% estate grown Chardonnay is, there is only 100 cases made. Steve chose when to pick and which barrels. All of the above. Wow, wildly different answers. And the irony of this is when I wrote this question out earlier in the week, I knew the answer. So we're going to give this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I saw a late answer change. A lot of money on this, Steve. It rolls over week to week. It's like the lotto. So no, there's been no clear winner yet. So only 100 cases made, except all of the above was kind of a trick answer. So what is the real answer to this? I'm asking you, Stephen, because I don't know. I actually thought I thought the video froze.
I love the off-camera laughter, Denise. I don't know whether you're laughing with us or at us. It's all good because laughter is good. Well, not at people, but.
No. And by the way, for the record, she said, I'm laughing at Martin.
Okay, very good. I did not choose the barrels, so everybody that did not choose that one got it right. Yes, the winemaker chooses the barrels, Chris. There were about 100 cases made.
Well, that's what we had.
That may be the number that I gave you.
Okay, well then we are correct. So anybody that chose all of the above is wrong. You lose all your money. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And only 100 cases made. Still tiny, 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 tiny production of this Chardonnay, of the Block 1 Clone 96. I imagine the reserve Chardonnay is even less.
Yes, most often. I mean, we'll do these in 4 to 6, maybe occasionally a 10 barrel lot. So it's about 22.4 cases per barrel. So sometimes you'll see 88 cases listed, 89 cases are rounded to 9 for the 4 barrel lot.
Thank you for explaining that, because I've always wondered what on earth are these people doing.
So typically if it's below 500 cases, this is the old accountant in me, I will give the very specific case count. Okay. But over 500 cases, it's easier to round. People can remember what the number is. And while I'm demystifying some of these things, also like 12 months in oak, that very specific 12, 24, 36 months, they're just trying to convey 1, 2, or 3 years. But typically 24 months might be 22 months because you want to empty the barrels before the harvest if you're going to reuse them, or you may empty the barrels after harvest. But you're typically not taking wine out of barrel and bottling it during harvest because you're busy with harvest.
Sure.
Makes marketing sense to say it that way. It's a metaphor anyway. But in terms of the actual truth, probably not right at 12, 24, and 36 months.
Right. So when someone says
that's not the point.
When someone says this sees 36 months of new French oak, it's maybe 34 because they're taking that out and bottling or doing something else with the barrel.
Right. And then you get the question of what's magical about 34? It's like, well.
Well, and the answer to that, of course, is Walter Payton.
Well, very good redirect. Now we're talking.
We're talking Bear football. And for those of you just joining in, it's NFL week with Stephen and Martin.
Chicago NFL week.
Chicago NFL week. And by the way, the Bears are 1-0. So that's a good news thing. All right, Stephen, I've got to wrap up because the network is giving us the hook.
Oh, okay.
They aren't. But I want to thank everyone for attending, especially everyone, Jeff and Jane Greasy and the families, the Randalls, Jim Brubaker from Colorado, John Jacobs, Renee Degger, Michelle Kuznich jumped on, Kay Jurica, Julie Fogarty, and these are just the Zoom folks. All of you on Facebook, thank you so much. Stephen Corley took some time this evening during harvest to spend a little bit of an hour with the folks from SIP to talk about not only this incredible Chardonnay that we're all tasting, which is available on Cellar Angels right now, but really to share with us a 50-year journey with his family. And it's a birthday celebration that's going to last 6 years. And we'll get into that on our next visit with Stephen, which I don't know when that's going to be, but it's an impressive birthday. Next week, we have an interesting story called Spicy Vines, a wonderful story that's going to pull at your heartstrings. For those of you that are getting ready to look at the holiday season, corporate gifts are actually starting to flow into Cellar Angels. So please be thinking about that. And I would be remiss if I didn't give Stephen one more nod, and also to brothers Kevin and Chris and the whole family and the youngest daughter, because I know she's played a pivotal role. But Stephen, you've been a gracious host, and I know where you got that from. So from our heart to your heart, thank you so much for everything this evening and for making a damn fine wine.
Oh, well, thank you all very much. Thanks for taking the time out to spend with me. That's a Friday night around the country, around the planet. And it's meaningful that you chose to spend time with us because you could spend it a lot of different places. So thanks to all of you.
Absolutely. Cheers. Be safe, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Take care.